I'm about to walk into a life that isn't mine, pretend to be a man I've never met, and lie to a woman who's about to pay me $5 billion to break her heart all over again. My hands are shaking as I stare at the iron gates of the Montgomery estate. Behind me, the Uber driver counts the cash I gave him, enough to keep his mouth shut about dropping someone off at one of Manhattan's most exclusive addresses. Ahead of me lies the biggest lie of my life: $5 billion. That's what she's offering me to pretend to be her dead husband for 30 days. My name is Jake Morrison, and 3 days ago, I was bartending at a dive bar in Brooklyn, barely scraping together rent money for my studio apartment. Today, I'm about to walk into a mansion worth more than most people see in 10 lifetimes, all because I happen to look exactly like a man named Alexander Montgomery, a man who died in a plane crash 6 months ago. The security guard doesn't even blink when he sees me. His face goes white, his hand trembles as he opens the gate. Mr. Montgomery, he whispers. I've practiced this moment 100 times in the mirror, but nothing prepared me for the weight of that name, for the way it feels to step into a dead man's shoes. Literally. They gave me his clothes, his Rolex, even his cologne. Everything except his memories. The mansion looms before me like something out of Gatsby's dreams. Neoclassical columns, infinity pools, gardens that stretch toward the Hudson River. This is old money, the kind that built Manhattan's skylines and owns half of Wall Street. And somewhere inside is Victoria Montgomery, the woman who posted that cryptic message on a private forum 3 weeks ago, seeking someone with a very specific look, discretion guaranteed, payment, life-changing. I should have walked away, should have deleted the message and gone back to my double shifts and ramen dinners. But when I saw the photo she sent, a picture of her late husband, it was like looking in a mirror. Same dark hair, same blue eyes, same scar above the left eyebrow from a childhood hockey accident. We could have been twins. The front door opens before I can knock, and there she is. Victoria Montgomery steals the breath from my lungs. She's nothing like the grieving widow I expected. Her platinum blonde hair is pulled back in an elegant chignon, framing a face that belongs on the cover of Vogue, not hidden away in mourning. But it's her eyes that undo me. Piercing green pools filled with a pain so raw it makes my chest ache. She's wearing a simple black Chanel dress that probably costs more than my yearly salary, and for a moment she just stares at me. Her lips part slightly, and I watch as tears begin to gather in her eyes. My God, she whispers, and her voice is like velvet over broken glass. You're perfect. I want to tell her I'm sorry for her loss. Want to explain that I'm just a nobody from Brooklyn who happens to share a face with the man she loved. Instead, I find myself saying the words we rehearsed over encrypted video calls. Hello, Victoria. She flinches like I've slapped her. Her hand flies to her throat and I realize my mistake. Too formal, too distant. A husband wouldn't greet his wife like a stranger, even after 6 months. I clear my throat, stepping closer. Hey, beautiful. The endearment feels foreign on my tongue, but it has the desired effect. Her tears spill over, and before I can react, she's throwing herself into my arms. She fits against me perfectly, like we've done this dance 1,000 times. Her perfume, something French and expensive, floods my senses, and I have to remind myself that this is an act. A very lucrative, very temporary act. I've missed you so much, she sobs into my chest. I've missed you so much, Alex. Alex, not Jake. For the next 30 days, Jake Morrison doesn't exist. I've missed you too. I lie, and the words taste like ash. She pulls back to look at me, her hands framing my face like she's afraid I'll disappear. Up close, she's even more beautiful. But there's something else. A desperation that makes my stomach twist with guilt. How is this possible? She whispers. The investigator said. They said there was no chance. The plane went down in the Atlantic. They couldn't even recover. Shh. I brush a tear from her cheek, surprised by how natural the gesture feels. I'm here now. That's all that matters. She nods, but I can see the questions in her eyes. Questions I'm not sure I'm equipped to answer. The real Alexander had an entire life, relationships, memories I know nothing about. What if she asks about their honeymoon in Paris, their first date? What if she expects me to know things only a husband would know? "Come inside," she says, taking my hand. "Emma has been asking about you every day. She's at her private school right now, but when she gets home..." Emma, their daughter. 5 years old, according to the file Victoria gave me. Suddenly, the weight of what I'm doing crashes down on me. It's one thing to lie to a grieving widow. It's another to deceive a child. "Victoria," I start, but she's already pulling me through doors that open into a living room larger than my entire apartment building. Everything screams wealth. Crystal chandeliers from Austria, artwork that probably belongs in the Met, furniture that looks like it was designed by the masters. But what strikes me most is how empty it feels, like a beautiful mausoleum. "I've had your home office cleaned," she says, her voice bright with forced cheerfulness. "And I put fresh flowers in our bedroom, the white orchids you always loved." Our bedroom. Christ, I hadn't thought about that. Where exactly does she expect me to sleep? "Victoria, we should talk about..." "Later," she interrupts, spinning to face me. "I know you have questions. I know this is unusual. But please, just for today, can we pretend everything is normal? Can you just be my husband?" The desperation in her voice breaks something inside me. This woman isn't just rich, she's drowning. Drowning in grief and loneliness and a pain so deep it's carved lines around her eyes that no amount of money can erase. "Of course," I hear myself saying. "Whatever you need." She smiles then, the first real smile I've seen from her, and it's like watching the sun break through storm clouds. "Thank you," she whispers. "You have no idea what this means to me." But as she leads me deeper into the house, past photographs of the real Alexander, past a life I'll never truly understand, I can't shake the feeling that I'm the one who has no idea what I've gotten myself into. The truth is, I came here for the money. $5 billion would solve every problem I've ever had and several I haven't thought of yet. I came here to play a part, collect my payment, and disappear back into anonymity. What I didn't expect was the way my heart would stop when she smiled. What I didn't expect was how right it would feel to hold her. What I didn't expect was to realize, somewhere between the iron gates and her French perfume, that I'm not just pretending to be her husband. I'm falling in love with her. And in 30 days, when the truth comes out, it's going to destroy us both. Day 3 of pretending to be Alexander Montgomery, and I'm starting to understand why they say money can't buy happiness. It can, however, buy you the most beautiful prison in Manhattan. I wake up in a bed that costs more than most people's cars, staring at a ceiling painted by some dead Italian master whose name I can't pronounce. The Egyptian cotton sheets feel like silk against my skin, and for a moment, I forget I'm living someone else's life. Then I hear it. Victoria's voice drifting from downstairs, talking to someone on the phone. "Yes, Dr. Hartwell, I understand the risks. No, I don't think I need the medication anymore, because he's back." She's talking about me, about Alexander, about the lie that's keeping her from falling apart. I've been here 3 days now, and every moment feels like walking on a tightrope made of glass. Victoria has been nothing but gracious, giving me space in the guest wing while I readjust. She thinks I need time to process whatever trauma kept me away for 6 months. If only she knew the only trauma I'm processing is the guilt of taking her money to break her heart. I pull on clothes that fit perfectly, Alexander's clothes, tailored to measurements that match mine exactly. It's unsettling how everything about him fits me like a second skin. His watch, his shoes, even his cologne seems to complement my chemistry in a way that makes me wonder if this resemblance goes deeper than just looks. Downstairs, the smell of fresh coffee and something that definitely didn't come from a microwave fills the air. I follow the scent to a kitchen that's bigger than my entire Brooklyn apartment, where Victoria stands at a marble island, looking like she stepped out of a magazine spread about billionaire wives who cook. "Morning, beautiful," I say, the endearment coming easier now. She turns, and the smile that lights up her face makes my chest tight. She's wearing yoga pants and an oversized sweater that probably costs more than my car. her hair in a messy bun that somehow looks perfect. This is domestic Victoria, and she's even more dangerous than the grieving widow who opened the door 3 days ago. "I made your favorite," she says, gesturing to a plate of eggs Benedict with what looks like truffle shavings on top. "Well, I had Chef Marcus make it. You know I'm hopeless with anything more complicated than toast." "I don't know that. I don't know anything about their inside jokes, their routines, their life together." But I smile and kiss her forehead like it's the most natural thing in the world. "Smells incredible," I say, and it's not a lie. As I eat breakfast that probably costs more than most people spend on groceries in a month, Victoria chatters about her schedule. Charity luncheon at noon, board meeting at 3, dinner with her sister at 8. Normal, rich person problems that feel surreal after 3 days of pretending to belong in this world. "Emma gets home at 4, she says, and her voice changes, becomes softer. "She's been asking about you every day since you came back. I think she's afraid you'll disappear again." The guilt hits me like a punch to the gut. "What did you tell her about where I was?" Victoria's hands still on her coffee cup. "I told her you were sick, that you needed time to get better." She's 5, Alex. She doesn't understand death, doesn't understand that people can just vanish. But they can. People vanish all the time. Sometimes they die in plane crashes, and sometimes they're Brooklyn bartenders who take money to pretend to be ghosts. "She'll be fine," I say, reaching across to squeeze her hand. "We'll be fine." The lie tastes bitter on my tongue, but Victoria's grateful smile makes it worth it. For now. An hour later, I'm in Alexander's study, trying to piece together a life I'm supposed to have lived. The room is a shrine to success. Harvard MBA on the wall. Photos with senators and CEOs. Awards from charities I've never heard of. There's a picture on the desk of Victoria and Emma at what looks like a beach house, both of them laughing at something off camera. They look happy, complete. I'm studying the spines of books I'll never read when Victoria appears in the doorway. "The Hartley Foundation called," she says. "They want to schedule a meeting about the scholarship program you were working on before." She trails off, unable to say the words. Before he died. Before the plane crash that killed Alexander Montgomery and gave birth to the biggest lie of my life. "Can you postpone it?" I ask. I'm still getting my bearings. She nods, but I can see the disappointment. Alexander Montgomery was apparently the kind of man who ran scholarship programs and had important meetings. Jake Morrison is the kind of man who knows how to make the perfect martini and can spot a fake ID from across a crowded bar. "There's something else," Victoria says, and the tone of her voice makes me look up. "My sister wants to have dinner tonight. Just the 3 of us. She's suspicious." Suspicious? Of course she is. If someone who looked exactly like my dead brother-in-law showed up claiming to be alive, I'd be suspicious too. "What kind of suspicious?" I ask. "The kind where she's already hired a private investigator." My blood turns to ice. "What?" Victoria comes into the room, closing the door behind her. For the first time since I've been here, she looks scared. "Rebecca never liked you," she says quietly. "She always thought you married me for the money. When you died, she was almost relieved. Said I was better off without you. I should be offended on Alexander's behalf, but mostly I'm terrified. A private investigator could unravel this whole thing in a matter of days. And now that you're back," Victoria continues, "she thinks it's some kind of scam. She keeps asking questions I can't answer, like why you don't have any medical records from wherever you've been, why you haven't contacted any of your friends, why you seem different. Different. Because I am different. I'm not the man she married, the man she loved, the man who died 6 months ago leaving behind a wife and daughter and a fortune I can't even comprehend." "What did you tell her?" I ask. "That trauma changes people, that you're still recovering." "But Alex..." She uses that name like a prayer, like saying it enough times will make it true. She's not going to let this go. If she finds out the truth, she doesn't finish the sentence, but she doesn't need to. If Rebecca finds out the truth, this whole thing falls apart. Victoria loses her husband again, Emma loses her father again, and I lose the only thing that's ever made me feel like I matter. I'll handle Rebecca, I say, standing up and taking her hands. I'll convince her. Victoria looks up at me with those green eyes that see too much, hope and fear warring in her expression. How? She whispers. I lean down and kiss her forehead, tasting the desperation on her skin. By being the man you fell in love with. But as the words leave my mouth, I realize the terrible truth. I'm not falling in love with the idea of being Alexander Montgomery. I'm falling in love with Victoria. The real Victoria, not the grieving widow paying me to play pretend. And tonight, when I meet her sister, I'm going to have to convince someone who knew Alexander intimately that I'm a man I've never been, while fighting the urge to tell Victoria the one truth that would destroy everything. I'm not your husband, but I wish I was your everything. The clock on the mantel chimes noon, and I realize I have 8 hours to figure out how to fool a woman who's already looking for cracks in my facade. 8 hours to perfect a performance that's becoming less like acting and more like desperation with every passing moment. 8 hours before everything I never knew I wanted comes crashing down around me. Meeting your dead husband's suspicious sister-in-law while falling for his wife? Just another Tuesday in my perfectly normal, not at all complicated life. Emma Montgomery has her mother's eyes and her father's smile, or at least the smile I've been practicing in the mirror for 3 days. She's 5 years old, clutching a stuffed elephant that's seen better days, and she's staring at me like I'm either a miracle or a monster. "Daddy?" she whispers from the doorway of the study. My heart stops. Actually stops. Because this isn't part of the contract. Victoria never mentioned how it would feel to have a child look at you with unconditional love, expecting you to be someone you're not. "Hey, princess," I say, the words coming from somewhere deep in my chest that I didn't know existed. She runs to me then, launching herself into my arms with the kind of trust that makes my throat close up. She smells like strawberry shampoo and childhood, and when she wraps her small arms around my neck, I understand why Victoria is paying me $5 billion to live this lie. "I missed you, Daddy," she says into my shoulder. "Mommy cried a lot when you were gone." Over her head, I see Victoria in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. Not the elegant, controlled tears of grief, but the raw, desperate tears of a mother watching her daughter get her father back. "I missed you too, sweetheart," I say. And it's not entirely a lie. I've missed having someone look at me like I matter, like I'm worth coming home to. Emma pulls back to study my face with the serious intensity only children possess. "You look different," she says. "Sadder. A kid see everything. Every lie, every pretense, every crack in the facade. If I'm going to fool a 5-year-old, I need to be more than just Alexander's doppelganger. I need to be her father. Sometimes when people go away, they come back a little different," I tell her, "but the important parts stay the same. The parts that love you." She seems to consider this, then nods solemnly. "Will you read me a story tonight?" "Of course." "The one about the princess and the dragon?" I have no idea what story she's talking about, but I nod anyway. "Wouldn't miss it." She grins, Alexander's grin on a tiny face, and skips out of the room, already calling for her nanny to help her with homework. Just like that, I've passed the first test. Victoria approaches slowly, like she's afraid sudden movements might shatter the moment. "She's been having nightmares," she says quietly. "About you not coming back. The therapist said it was normal, but it killed you anyway." She nods, fresh tears spilling over. "How did you know what to say? You were always good with her, but that was perfect." "Because I know what it's like to lose a father," I want to tell her. "Because I spent most of my childhood wishing someone would look at me the way Emma just looked at me. Instead, I pull Victoria into my arms and hold her while she cries against my chest. "We're going to be okay," I whisper into her hair. "All of us." Another lie. But this one feels necessary, vital, like oxygen. By 7:30, I'm wearing a suit that costs more than most people's cars and trying not to sweat through the fabric. Victoria chose the restaurant, some place called Le Bernardin, that apparently requires a 2-month waiting list and a credit check just to get a reservation. The kind of place where Jake Morrison would get laughed out of the lobby. But I'm not Jake Morrison tonight. I'm Alexander Montgomery, billionaire philanthropist, devoted husband, and very much not dead. Rebecca Ashford arrives exactly on time, which tells me everything I need to know about Victoria's sister. She's the kind of woman who treats punctuality like a religion and probably has her assistant schedule her bathroom breaks. Tall, blonde, and sharp enough to cut glass, she looks like Victoria's evil twin, all the beauty with none of the warmth. Alexander, she says, and my name sounds like an accusation in her mouth. How unexpected. Rebecca. I stand to kiss her cheek, the way a brother-in-law would. She smells like expensive perfume and suspicion. You look beautiful. I look confused, she says, settling into her chair with the predatory grace of a woman who's used to getting answers. 6 months ago, we had a funeral, a very expensive, very final funeral. And now you're sitting here like nothing happened. Victoria reaches for my hand under the table, her fingers trembling. Becca, please, we talked about this. No, Victoria, you talked. You told me some ridiculous story about trauma and amnesia, but you never explained how a man whose plane went down in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean managed to survive without a scratch. The waiter appears with wine, something that probably costs more than my old apartment's monthly rent, but I barely taste it. Rebecca's eyes never leave my face, cataloging every micro-expression, every tell. Trauma affects everyone differently, I say carefully. The doctors said, which doctors? Rebecca cuts me off. Because I've called every major hospital from here to Miami and not one of them has any record of treating Alexander Montgomery for anything in the past 6 months. Shit. Victoria squeezes my hand harder, and I can feel her panic bleeding through her fingertips. Private physicians, I say. Confidential treatment. How convenient. Rebecca leans back in her chair and I can practically see the gears turning behind her eyes. Tell me, Alexander, do you remember our conversation at Christmas? The one about the Hamptons house? I have no idea what she's talking about, but I can't let her know that. Which conversation? I ask, buying time. The one where you told me you were thinking of selling it. Said it held too many memories of your father. Victoria stiffens beside me. This is clearly news to her, which means either Rebecca is lying or Alexander was keeping secrets from his wife. I remember. I lie smoothly. I decided against it. Too hasty. Rebecca's smile is all teeth. Interesting. Because Alexander hated that house. Called it a monument to his father's ego. He would have burned it down before he'd keep it for sentimental reasons. My blood turns to ice. She's testing me, and I'm failing spectacularly. People change, I say weakly. Yes, they do. Rebecca signals the waiter for another bottle of wine. They especially change when they're not who they claim to be. The silence stretches between us like a loaded gun. Victoria's breathing is shallow, panicked, and I can see the moment she realizes what I've known all along. This was never going to work. Becca, Victoria says desperately, you're being paranoid. Am I? Or am I being practical? Rebecca turns to her sister with something that might be compassion if it weren't wrapped in so much steel. Honey, I know you miss him. I know you'd give anything to have him back. But this man... She gestures at me like I'm evidence in a crime scene. This man is not your husband. Yes, he is. Victoria's voice breaks on the words. He has to be. And there it is. The truth that's been hiding under all the expensive lies. Victoria doesn't just want Alexander back, she needs him back. Needs it so desperately that she's willing to pay $5 billion to a stranger who shares his face. Prove it, Rebecca says, and her voice is gentler now, but no less deadly. Prove you're Alexander Montgomery. I could tell her about the scar above my eyebrow, could recite the facts from the file Victoria gave me, could perform the role I've been practicing for 3 days. Instead, I find myself saying, I can't. Victoria's hand goes slack in mine. Rebecca leans forward like a shark sensing blood in the water. I can't prove I'm Alexander Montgomery, I continue, because I'm not him. The words hang in the air like a death sentence. Victoria makes a sound like something breaking. and Rebecca's eyes widen with vindicated shock. But I can prove something else, I say, looking directly at Victoria. I can prove that I love your sister more than Alexander ever did. Victoria stares at me like I've lost my mind. Maybe I have. Alexander married you for your family's connections, I continue, the words pouring out of me like blood from a wound. He told me so himself, said you were beautiful and rich and exactly what his image needed. But he never looked at you the way you deserve to be looked at. Never saw how you light up a room just by walking into it. Never noticed that you hum Sinatra when you're cooking, or that you read Emma 3 stories every night instead of 1 because you can't bear to disappoint her. Victoria's eyes fill with tears, but she doesn't look away. I've been in your house for 3 days, and I've seen more love in your little finger than Alexander had in his entire body. You deserve better than a man who married you for your trust fund. You deserve someone who would give up everything just to make you smile. Stop, Victoria whispers. Please stop. But I can't stop, because this is the only truth I have left to give her. I'm not your husband, I say, echoing the line I've been practicing. But I wish I was your everything. Rebecca is staring at me like I've grown a second head. Victoria is crying openly now, her perfect makeup running in rivers down her cheeks. Who are you? She asks, and her voice is smaller than Emma's. My name is Jake Morrison. I'm a bartender from Brooklyn. And 3 days ago you offered me $5 billion to pretend to be the man you loved. The restaurant continues around us, clinking glasses, murmured conversations, the sound of lives that make sense. But at our table, the world has stopped. The man I loved, Victoria repeats slowly. But you just said, I said Alexander didn't deserve you. I never said you didn't love him. She stares at me for a long moment, processing the difference. Then she stands up so abruptly her chair topples backward. Excuse me, she says, her voice perfectly controlled. I need some air. She walks out of the restaurant with the kind of dignity that only comes from a lifetime of practice, leaving me alone with Rebecca in the smoking ruins of the biggest lie of my life. Rebecca pours herself another glass of wine with steady hands. Well, she says conversationally. That was unexpected. You got what you wanted, I say. I'm exposed. Victoria knows the truth. You win. Rebecca studies me over her wine glass. Do I? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like my sister just learned that the man she's been grieving for 6 months was a gold-digging bastard, and the stranger she hired to replace him is head over heels in love with her. It doesn't matter how I feel about her. Doesn't it? Rebecca leans forward. Tell me, Jake Morrison from Brooklyn, what's your end game here? The money? Originally? Yes. But now? I trail off because I don't know how to explain that somewhere between Emma's hug and Victoria's tears, $5 billion stopped mattering. Now you'd give it all up for her. It's not a question. In a heartbeat. Rebecca nods slowly. Good, because I have a proposition for you. I thought confessing the truth would be the hardest part. I was wrong. The hardest part is what comes after, when love and lies collide and nothing will ever be the same. Rebecca's proposition is insane. We're sitting in her penthouse office at 2 a.m, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows that look out over Manhattan like we own the city. Maybe she does. The Ashford family money goes back generations, and Rebecca has the kind of power that comes from never hearing the word no. Let me get this straight, I say, accepting the scotch she poured me, something that probably costs more than most people's cars. You want me to keep pretending to be Alexander, permanently. Not pretending, Rebecca corrects, settling into the leather chair across from me. Becoming. Legally, financially, completely. Alexander Montgomery died in that plane crash. Jake Morrison can die just as easily. That's identity theft. Fraud. Probably a dozen other felonies I can't pronounce. Rebecca waves a manicured hand like she's swatting away flies. Details. I have lawyers who specialize in making inconvenient truths disappear. I lean back in my chair, trying to process what she's suggesting. Why would you help me? An hour ago you were ready to expose me. An hour ago, I thought you were a con man trying to steal my sister's money. Rebecca takes a sip of her scotch, studying me over the rim. Now I know you're an idiot who's genuinely in love with her. And that's better. It's useful. She sets down her glass with the decisive click of crystal on mahogany. Victoria has been in love with a ghost for 6 months. A ghost who, it turns out, married her for her trust fund and never deserved her tears. But you... I'm a bartender from Brooklyn. You're a man who makes her smile, who makes Emma feel safe, who would give up $5 billion just to tell Victoria the truth about her dead husband. Rebecca leans forward. Do you have any idea how rare that is in our world? I think about Victoria's face when I confessed, the way she looked like I'd torn her heart out and handed it back to her. She's not exactly thrilled with my honesty. She's processing. Victoria has always been too trusting, too willing to see the best in people. Learning that Alexander was using her will take time to sink in. And you think she'll just accept me as a replacement? Like I'm some kind of understudy stepping into a role? Rebecca's smile is sharp enough to cut glass. I think Victoria is a romantic who's been given a second chance at love with a man who actually deserves her. And I think you're exactly stupid enough to make it work. I finish my scotch, letting the burn ground me in reality. What's in it for you? Peace of mind. Victoria has been sleepwalking through life since Alexander died. Emma barely speaks above a whisper. The foundation he was supposed to run is hemorrhaging money because no one knows what his vision was. Rebecca stands, walking to the windows that look out over her kingdom. Alexander Montgomery was all image and no substance, but Jake Morrison loves my sister enough to give up everything for her happiness. She might never forgive me for lying to her. She might not, but she'll definitely never forgive Alexander for using her. Rebecca turns back to me. The way I see it, you have 2 choices. Walk away now, go back to your bar in Brooklyn, and let Victoria spend the rest of her life mourning a man who never existed. Or stay, become the man she deserves, and give Emma the father she needs. The weight of the decision settles on my shoulders like a lead blanket. In the distance, I can see the Montgomery mansion, dark except for a single light in what I know is Victoria's bedroom. She's probably staring at the ceiling, trying to reconcile 6 months of grief with the knowledge that her perfect marriage was built on lies. There's something else, Rebecca says, and the tone of her voice makes me look up. Something I didn't tell you at dinner. More secrets, I'm shocked. She moves to a safe hidden behind a painting that probably belongs in the Met, entering a code with practiced fingers. When she turns back, she's holding a file thick enough to choke a horse. This is Alexander's real medical file, the one from his private physician, the one Victoria never saw. She hands me the file, and my hands shake as I open it. Page after page of test results, psychological evaluations, prescription records, and one word that appears over and over: sociopathy. Alexander Montgomery was a clinical sociopath, Rebecca says quietly. Charming, manipulative, completely incapable of genuine emotion. Dr. Hartwell diagnosed him 3 years ago, but Alexander threatened to ruin him if he ever told Victoria. I stare at the pages, the words blurring together. She has no idea. None. She saw what he wanted her to see: the perfect husband, the devoted father, the philanthropist. She never knew about the affairs, the gambling debts, the business deals that would have destroyed the family reputation if they'd come to light. Oh, why are you telling me this? Rebecca takes the file back, locking it away like the dangerous secret it is. Because Victoria has been mourning a man who never existed. She's been torturing herself with grief over someone who was incapable of loving her back. And now she has a chance to love someone real. Someone real who's been lying to her for 3 days. Someone real who told her the truth when it mattered. Rebecca moves to her desk, pulling out a legal document that looks official enough to start wars. This is a new identity package: birth certificate, social security number, college transcripts, medical records. Jake Morrison from Brooklyn becomes Alexander Montgomery from Manhattan. No one will ever know the difference. I stare at the papers like they're radioactive. This is crazy. This is love. Rebecca's voice softens for the first time since I've known her. Real love, not the fairy tale Victoria has been chasing. The question is, do you love her enough to become the man she needs you to be? Before I can answer, my phone buzzes. A text from Victoria. Come home, please. We need to talk. Home. She called the mansion home like I belong there. I have to go, I say, standing up. Jake. Rebecca's voice stops me at the door. Whatever you decide, decide fast. Victoria's been broken once by a man she trusted. If you're going to break her again, it's better to do it now before Emma gets more attached. I take the elevator down 40 floors, thinking about 5-year-old girls who hug like they're afraid you'll disappear, and women who cry in expensive kitchens, and the difference between being wanted and being needed. By the time I reach the street, I've made my decision. Victoria is waiting for me in the garden, sitting on a bench beside the fountain that probably costs more than most people's houses. She's changed out of her restaurant clothes into jeans and a sweater, and somehow she looks even more beautiful without all the armor of wealth. I wasn't sure you'd come back, she says without looking at me. I'll always come back to you. The words are out before I can stop them, raw and honest and completely true. She finally looks up, and I can see she's been crying. Even after what I did? Paying you to lie to me to pretend to be someone you're not? I sit beside her, careful to leave space between us. You were in pain. You were trying to survive. I was being selfish. She pulls her sweater tighter around herself. I knew something was wrong. The way you held me, the way you looked at Emma, even the way you kissed my forehead. It was different. Better. But I didn't want to question it because it felt so good to have you. To have someone love me the way you did. The way I do, I correct. Present tense. Victoria turns to face me fully, and in the moonlight, she looks young and fragile and completely lost. You said Alexander married me for my money. Rebecca told me. I'm sorry. Were you lying? About that? About any of it? I could lie now. Could tell her that confession was just another performance, another way to manipulate her emotions. It would be easier, cleaner. It would let her hate me instead of forcing her to confront the truth about her marriage. Instead, I pull out my phone and show her a photo. The only picture I have of my real life. Me behind the bar at Mickey's, grinning at the camera with a black eye from breaking up a fight the night before. That's who I really am, I say. Jake Morrison, 28 years old, grew up in foster care, dropped out of community college, been tending bar for 5 years. No family, no money, no prospects. 3 days ago, I was 2 months behind on rent and eating ramen for dinner. She studies the photo like she's trying to memorize every detail. You look happy. I was. It's not much of a life, but it was mine. And now? I take her hand, and she doesn't pull away. Now I'm in love with a woman who's so far out of my league she might as well be from another planet, and I have no idea what to do about it. Victoria is quiet for a long time, staring at our joined hands. When she speaks, her voice is barely above a whisper. There's something I need to tell you. About Alexander. About why I was so desperate to believe you were him. Rebecca told me. About the sociopathy. Victoria's head snaps up. She what? She has his medical files. She knows what he was. Fresh tears spill down Victoria's cheeks. I thought I was losing my mind. The affairs, the lying, the way he could be so cruel and then so charming. I kept thinking it was my fault that I wasn't enough to make him happy. I pull her against me and she comes willingly, curling into my chest like she belongs there. It wasn't your fault, I say into her hair. None of it was your fault. I mourned him for 6 months, she says brokenly. 6 months of thinking I'd lost the love of my life, and he never loved me at all. But someone does, I say, and she looks up at me with eyes full of hope and fear. Someone loves you so much he'd rather lose $5 billion than keep lying to you. Jake, I know this is insane. I know I'm not the man you plan to fall in love with. But I'm here, and I'm real, and I love you and Emma more than I've ever loved anything in my life. Victoria reaches up to touch my face, her fingers tracing the scar above my eyebrow, the scar that made this whole impossible thing possible. "What happens now?" she asks. I think about Rebecca's offer, about legal documents and new identities and the chance to become someone worthy of the woman in my arms, about Emma sleeping upstairs, dreaming of dragons and princesses and fathers who come home. "Now you decide," I say. "Do you want Jake Morrison, the bartender from Brooklyn who loves you? Or do you want to keep mourning Alexander Montgomery, the husband who never existed?" Victoria is quiet for so long I think she's not going to answer. Then she leans up and kisses me. Not the desperate, grief-stricken kiss of a widow, but the soft, sure kiss of a woman who's finally found something real. When she pulls back, she's smiling through her tears. "I want Jake Morrison," she whispers. "I want the man who reads bedtime stories and makes coffee in the morning and loves me enough to tell me the truth even when it hurts." I kiss her again, tasting salt and hope and the future we're about to build together. "There's just one problem," I say against her lips. "What?" I reach into my pocket and pull out the legal documents Rebecca gave me, the ones that would make Jake Morrison disappear forever and Alexander Montgomery rise from the dead. "I can't be Jake Morrison and stay in your world, but I can be Alexander Montgomery and love you the way you deserve to be loved." Victoria stares at the papers, understanding immediately what they represent. "A second chance," she says quietly. "For both of us." She takes the documents, weighing them in her hands like they're made of gold instead of paper. "Alexander Montgomery," she says, testing the name. "My husband who came back from the dead to love me properly this time. If you'll have me." Victoria looks up at the mansion where our daughter is sleeping, then back at me, her husband, her stranger, her second chance at everything she thought she'd lost. "I'll have you," she says, and seals it with a kiss that tastes like forever. In the distance, a clock chimes midnight, and Alexander Montgomery is officially reborn. But this time, he's going to get it right. Epilogue. 6 months later. Emma's laughter echoes through the garden as she chases butterflies in her princess dress, the dragon storybook clutched in her free hand. She's requested it every night for 6 months, and I've never gotten tired of reading it to her. "Daddy, look," she calls, pointing at a monarch that's landed on her finger. "It likes me." "Of course it does," I call back. "You're irresistible." Victoria appears beside me on the terrace, sliding into my arms like she was made to fit there. She's glowing, literally glowing with the kind of happiness that radiates from the inside out. "The Montgomery Foundation scholarship program just got approved for another year," she says, kissing my cheek. 100 kids are going to college because of you." "Because of us," I correct, spinning her around until she laughs. The Alexander Montgomery who died in that plane crash never would have cared about scholarships or foundations or anything beyond his own image. But the man who took his place, the man who learned to love from a bartender's heart, he understands that some things matter more than money. "I have something for you," Victoria says, pulling a small velvet box from her pocket. I stare at it in confusion. It's not my birthday. It's better than a birthday. She opens the box to reveal a simple gold band, nothing like the ostentatious Cartier ring Alexander used to wear. "It's an anniversary present. 6 months since you came back to me. Since you chose to stay." I let her slip the ring onto my finger and it fits perfectly, like everything else in this life I never expected to want. "I love you, Alexander Montgomery," she says, and the name sounds right now. Natural. True. "I love you too, Mrs. Montgomery." Emma runs up to us, butterfly still perched on her finger. "Are you getting married again?" "Every day," I tell her, lifting her up so she can see the butterfly up close. "Every single day." As the sun sets over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of gold and possibility, I realize that sometimes the best lies are the ones that become truth. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find out what really matters. And sometimes, just sometimes, dead men do get second chances. The end. They say you can't buy love. They're wrong. You can't buy love, but you can choose it, fight for it, and become worthy of it. And sometimes, If you're very lucky, love chooses you back. The glass of champagne slipped from Sofia Martinez's trembling fingers, shattering against the marble floor of the Grandview Hotel's opulent lobby. Crystal fragments scattered like her composure as 200 pairs of eyes turned toward her. She wasn't supposed to be here. Not in this world of designer gowns and diamond tiaras. Not at the most exclusive charity gala in Manhattan. Miss Blackwood, a woman in Chanel, swept toward her, arms outstretched. Darling, you look absolutely radiant. Though I must say, that dress is rather unexpected for someone of your stature. Sophia's heart hammered against her ribs. Blackwood. She opened her mouth to correct the mistake, but the woman continued breathlessly. Your father's merger announcement has everyone buzzing, and now this arranged marriage to the Sterling heir. What delicious drama. Come, everyone's dying to meet you properly. Before Sophia could protest, she was swept into a whirlwind of introductions. Business magnates shook her hand. Socialites. Air kissed her cheeks, and all the while, she felt like an actress who'd wandered onto the wrong movie set without a script. The truth was painfully simple. Sofia Martinez cleaned offices for a living. She'd only come to the Grandview to return a lost wallet she'd found while emptying wastebaskets in the building next door. Her faded jeans and oversized sweater had seemed perfectly adequate for a quick good deed. Now, surrounded by New York's elite, she felt like a sparrow among peacocks. There she is. A deep voice cut through the chatter like velvet over steel. Sophia turned and found herself staring into the most extraordinary pair of gray eyes she'd ever seen. The man before her stood with the casual confidence of someone born to command boardrooms and break hearts in equal measure. His midnight black hair was perfectly tousled, as if he'd just run his fingers through it, and his tailored tuxedo fit him like it had been crafted by angels with very good taste. Alexander Sterling, he said, extending his hand. Your future husband, apparently. The words hit Sophia like a champagne cork to the forehead. Future husband? She stared at his outstretched hand as if it might bite her. I think there's been a mistake, she began. Oh, there's definitely been a mistake, Alexander interrupted, his voice carrying an edge of dark amusement. The mistake was agreeing to this ridiculous arrangement in the first place. But since we're both trapped in this circus, we might as well make the best of it. He took her hand without waiting for permission, and the moment their skin touched, something electric shot up Sophia's arm. Alexander's eyes widened slightly, suggesting he'd felt it too. Tell me, Miss Blackwood, he said, his voice lower now, more intimate. What's your strategy here? Play the reluctant bride to drive up your asking price? Create drama for the tabloids? Because I have to admit, showing up in... He gestured at her casual outfit. This ensemble is either brilliantly calculated or completely insane. Sophia's temper flared. Being mistaken for someone else was one thing, but being insulted by a gorgeous stranger was another entirely. Maybe I just prefer comfort over pretension, she shot back, yanking her hand free. And maybe I think this whole thing is as ridiculous as you do. Alexander's smile was sharp as a blade. Good. At least we agree on something. Tell me, do you always speak to billionaires with such charming hostility, or am I special? You're not special, Sophia lied, acutely aware of how his presence seemed to fill the entire room. You're just another rich man who thinks the world revolves around him. Another? Alexander raised an eyebrow. How many billionaires are you currently engaged to? Because I'd like to know what I'm up against. Before Sophia could respond, a photographer appeared as if from thin air. Mr. Sterling, Miss Blackwood, just one photo for the society pages. The flash exploded before either could protest, capturing Sophia's look of deer-in-headlights panic and Alexander's expression of sardonic amusement. In that frozen moment, as spots danced before her eyes, Sophia realized her simple good deed had just launched her into a very complicated lie. And the most dangerous part wasn't the deception itself. It was the way Alexander Sterling was looking at her, as if she were a puzzle he was determined to solve. 24 hours later, Sophia found herself standing in front of a mirror in the penthouse suite of the Grandview Hotel, wearing a dress that cost more than her annual rent. The midnight blue silk clung to her curves like liquid starlight, and the diamond necklace around her throat felt heavier than her conscience. "Miss Blackwood," the hotel concierge had said that morning, "your father's assistant arranged everything. The stylist, the suite, the wedding preparations, all as requested." Wedding preparations. Sophia's stomach performed an Olympic-worthy gymnastics routine every time she heard those words. She'd spent the entire night pacing her tiny studio apartment, cell phone in hand, trying to work up the courage to call someone, anyone, to confess the truth. But who would believe her? "Hello, police? I accidentally got engaged to a billionaire." They'd think she was either delusional or running some elaborate con. A soft knock interrupted her spiraling thoughts. "Come in," she called, expecting the stylist. Instead, Alexander Sterling walked through the door, and Sophia's breath caught in her throat. If he'd been devastating in a tuxedo, he was absolutely lethal in a perfectly fitted charcoal suit that emphasized his broad shoulders and lean frame. His dark hair caught the afternoon light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, and those stormy gray eyes immediately found hers in the mirror. "Well," he said, his voice carrying that same dangerous edge from the night before, "you clean up nicely for someone who prefers comfort over pretension." Heat flooded Sophia's cheeks. "What are you doing here? Isn't it bad luck to see the bride before the wedding?" "Only if you believe in fairy tales," Alexander replied, moving closer, "and something tells me you're far too practical for that." He was wrong. Sophia had grown up on fairy tales, dreaming of princes and happy endings while folding laundry in her mother's cramped apartment. But fairy tales didn't prepare you for accidentally impersonating an heiress, or for the way your pulse skyrocketed when a gorgeous stranger looked at you like you were the most fascinating puzzle he'd ever encountered. "I brought you something," Alexander said, producing a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. Sophia's eyes widened. "Please tell me that's not—" "Your engagement ring," he finished smoothly. 17 carats, flawless diamond. Previously, owned by a Russian countess who reportedly threw it at her cheating husband's head. I thought the history suited our unconventional arrangement. He opened the box, revealing a ring that could have powered a small city with its brilliance. Sophia stared at it, feeling like Alice tumbling deeper down the rabbit hole. "I can't wear that," she whispered. "Why not? Too flashy for your taste?" Alexander's tone was teasing, but his eyes were serious. "Or are you finally ready to admit that this whole mysterious act of yours is just that? An act?" Sophia met his gaze in the mirror. There was something different about him today, an intensity that made her pulse quicken. He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and masculine that made her think of midnight drives and stolen kisses. "You want the truth?" she said, turning to face him directly. "I'd settle for your real name," Alexander replied, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. For a moment, Sophia teetered on the edge of confession. She could see something vulnerable flickering behind his confident facade, and she realized that maybe, just maybe, he was as confused by the situation as she was. But before she could speak, the door burst open, and a woman with perfectly coiffed silver hair swept in, radiating the kind of authority that made corporate executives weep. "Alexander, darling," and the blushing bride. The woman's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "I'm Victoria Sterling, Alexander's stepmother. We simply must discuss the prenuptial agreement." Sophia felt the blood drain from her face. Prenuptial agreement? She caught Alexander's eye in the mirror and saw her own panic reflected back at her. "Of course," Sophia managed, her voice sounding distant to her own ears. "The prenup." Victoria's smile widened, predatory and pleased. "Oh, my dear, you're going to sign away quite a fortune. But don't worry. I'm sure you and your father have your own arrangements figured out." As Victoria launched into legal terminology that made Sophia's head spin, Alexander moved to stand beside her. His hand brushed against hers, and she felt that same electric jolt from the night before. "Don't worry," he murmured so quietly only she could hear. "I'll make sure you're protected." The kindness in his voice nearly undid her. Here was this man, preparing to shield her from his own family's machinations, and he didn't even know her real name. The Sterling family's private dining room felt like a mausoleum decorated by someone with unlimited funds and questionable taste. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbows across walls lined with portraits of stern-faced ancestors, all of whom seemed to be judging Sophia's table manners. She sat rigidly in her chair, watching Alexander's family dissect her fictional background with surgical precision. "So tell us about your education, dear," purred Aunt Cordelia, a woman whose Botox addiction had left her face in a state of permanent surprise. "Surely Jonathan Blackwood's daughter attended the finest Swiss'im. Finishing schools?" Sophia nearly choked on her mineral water. Swiss finishing schools? The closest she'd come to international education was watching foreign films at the local library. "I preferred a more hands-on approach to learning," she managed, which was technically true if you counted scrubbing floors as educational. Alexander, seated across from her, caught her eye and winked. The simple gesture sent butterflies performing aerial acrobatics in her stomach. "Speaking of hands-on," interrupted Cousin Bradley, a man whose trust fund had clearly never taught him about personal boundaries. "I heard your family's textile empire uses some rather questionable labor practices in—" "Bradley," Alexander's voice cut through the air like a sword through silk. "Perhaps we could discuss something more appropriate for dinner conversation." The protective edge in his tone made Sophia's heart skip several beats. She was beginning to understand that beneath Alexander's cynical exterior lay something unexpectedly genuine and dangerously attractive. After an eternity of cross-examination disguised as small talk, Alexander stood abruptly. "If you'll excuse us, I'd like to show Sophia the city before our wedding tomorrow." Wedding tomorrow? The words hit Sophia like a bucket of ice water, but Alexander was already helping her from her chair, his hand warm and steady on her elbow. "But darling," Victoria's voice dripped false sweetness, "shouldn't you be reviewing the final contract details with—" "The contracts can wait," Alexander said firmly. "Some things are more important than business." 15 minutes later, Sophia found herself in the passenger seat of Alexander's vintage Aston Martin, the city lights blurring past as they drove through Manhattan's glittering streets. "Where are we going?" she asked, grateful to escape the Sterling family's suffocating scrutiny. "Somewhere they serve food that doesn't require 3 different forks," Alexander replied, a genuine smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Unless you're opposed to slumming it with the common folk?" "Are you kidding?" Sophia laughed, the first real laugh she'd had in 2 days. "I am the common folk." Alexander glanced at her, something unreadable flickering across his features. "You know, I'm starting to believe that." He pulled up outside a small diner tucked between a laundromat and a vintage bookstore. The neon sign flickered Mel's Place, and through the windows Sophia could see red vinyl booths and a counter where actual people sat eating actual food without discussing mergers or market fluctuations. "This is perfect," she breathed. "Really?" Alexander seemed genuinely surprised. "Most women in my position, Han, would expect somewhere with a Michelin star. Most women in my position would be thrilled to eat somewhere that doesn't judge you for using the wrong spoon," Sophia replied, then caught herself. She was getting too comfortable, letting too much truth slip through. Inside the diner, they slid into a corner booth, and Sophia felt herself relax for the first time since this whole charade began. Alexander ordered a cheeseburger and fries. Apparently, billionaires ate comfort food too, and the normalcy of it made her heart ache. "Can I ask you something?" Alexander said, leaning across the small table. His proximity made her pulse quicken. "Shoot. Why did you really agree to this arrangement? And don't give me some rehearsed answer about family duty, I want the truth." Sophia's mouth went dry. The truth was that she hadn't agreed to anything, that she was trapped in a lie that grew more complicated by the hour, and that she was falling for a man who didn't even know her real name. Instead, she found herself saying, "Maybe I wanted to see if fairy tales could actually come true." Alexander's expression softened. "And? What's the verdict so far?" "The jury's still out," she whispered. But the way he was looking at her like she was something precious and rare made her wonder if maybe, just maybe, some dreams were worth the risk. When he reached across the table and took her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm, Sophia felt her carefully constructed walls begin to crumble. Tomorrow she would have to marry this man under false pretenses. But tonight, in a little diner where nobody knew their names or cared about their net worth, she could almost pretend that love was possible. The morning sun streamed through the cathedral's stained glass windows, painting rainbow patterns across Sophia's ivory wedding gown. She stood before an ornate mirror in the bridal suite, her reflection showing a woman she barely recognized. Elegant, sophisticated, and absolutely terrified. "You look radiant, darling," cooed the wedding planner, a woman named Priscilla whose enthusiasm could power a small aircraft. "Simply divine. The press is going absolutely mad. Everyone wants to know who Jonathan Blackwood's mysterious daughter really is." Sophia's stomach performed a triple somersault. The press. Of course. There would be press. She was supposedly marrying one of New York's most eligible bachelors under completely false pretenses, and the whole world would be watching. A soft knock interrupted her panic spiral. "Come in," she called weakly. To her surprise, Alexander stepped inside looking devastatingly handsome in his morning coat and gray waistcoat. His dark hair was perfectly styled, but she could see the tension in his jaw, the uncertainty in those stormy gray eyes. "Isn't this bad luck?" Sophia asked, echoing their conversation from the day before. "I think we're already past worrying about luck," Alexander replied, closing the door behind him. "Besides, I needed to give you this." He pulled out an antique jewelry box, revealing a delicate pearl bracelet that looked like it belonged in a museum. "It was my grandmother's," he said quietly. "She always said it would bring the wearer courage when they needed it most." Sophia's eyes filled with tears as he fastened the bracelet around her wrist. His fingers were gentle against her skin, and she could feel her resolve crumbling with each tender touch. "Alexander, I need to tell you something." "No," he interrupted, his voice rough with emotion. "Whatever it is, it can wait. Because right now, looking at you in that dress, I realize I don't care about the merger, or the family expectations, or any of it. I just care about you." Before Sophia could respond, he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her. It was soft and desperate, and everything she'd imagined love could be. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. "I think I'm falling in love with you," Alexander whispered against her forehead. "And I don't even know if that's what you want to hear." "It's exactly what I want to hear," Sophia replied, her heart breaking and soaring simultaneously. But the door burst open, and Priscilla swept in with military precision. "Mr. Sterling, you absolutely cannot be here. The ceremony begins in 20 minutes and we have 300 guests waiting." As Alexander was shooed away, he caught Sophia's hand one last time. "Whatever happens out there, remember that what I just told you is real. Everything else is just theater." 30 minutes later, Sophia found herself walking down the cathedral's endless aisle, her arm linked with a man she'd never met who was playing her fictional father. Jonathan Blackwood's business partner had volunteered to give away the bride, apparently unaware that the bride was a complete stranger. The cathedral was packed with Manhattan's elite, all craning their necks to get a better look at the mysterious heiress. Cameras flashed from the designated press area, and Sophia felt like a fraud walking toward her own execution. But then, she saw Alexander waiting at the altar, his face lighting up when their eyes met, and suddenly nothing else mattered. Not the lie, not the consequences, not the 300 strangers watching her every move, just the man she was falling in love with, looking at her like she was his entire world. The ceremony began in a blur of Latin phrases and organ music. Sophia managed to repeat her vows without fainting, though her voice shook when she promised to love and honor a man who didn't even know her real name. When the minister asked for the rings, Alexander slipped the massive diamond onto her finger, his touch lingering longer than necessary. "With this ring," he said, his voice carrying, "clearly through the cathedral, I thee wed." And then, Just as the minister was about to pronounce them husband and wife, the cathedral doors crashed open. "Stop this wedding," a woman's voice rang out across the stunned silence. Sophia turned to see a tall, elegant blonde striding down the aisle, her designer heels clicking like gunshots against the marble floor. The woman was breathtakingly beautiful, with the kind of poise that came from years of private schools and country club memberships. "I'm sorry to interrupt," the woman announced, her voice carrying a slight British accent, "but I'm Charlotte Blackwood, and that woman pretending to be me is a complete fraud." The cathedral erupted in shocked whispers and camera flashes. Sophia felt the blood drain from her face as Alexander turned to stare at her, betrayal and confusion warring in his expression. Charlotte Blackwood, the real Charlotte Blackwood, smiled triumphantly. "Did you really think you could steal my identity and my fiancé without consequences? Security, please escort this imposter out immediately." As uniformed guards approached, Sophia's eyes met Alexander's one last time. The hurt and anger in his gaze cut deeper than any physical pain she'd ever experienced. "I can explain," she whispered, but the words were lost in the chaos erupting around them. The Sterling family's private conference room felt like a courtroom where Sophia was both defendant and key witness in her own trial. She sat at the massive mahogany table, still wearing her wedding dress, the ivory silk now feeling more like a costume from a play she'd never auditioned for. Alexander paced behind floor-to-ceiling, windows overlooking Central Park, his morning coat discarded, his tie loosened, his dark hair disheveled from running his hands through it repeatedly. The real Charlotte Blackwood sat across from Sophia, with the serene confidence of someone who'd never doubted her place in the world. Even after her dramatic cathedral entrance, not a single platinum blonde hair was out of place. She wore a burgundy Hermes suit that probably cost more than Sophia's annual salary, and her smile held all the warmth of a corporate hostile takeover. "So," Charlotte said, her British accent making every word sound like cut crystal, "shall we start with your real name? Or would you prefer to continue this fascinating charade a bit longer?" Sophia's throat felt like sandpaper. "Sophia Martinez," she whispered. "Sophia Martinez," Charlotte repeated thoughtfully. "And what exactly do you do for a living, Miss Martinez? Besides impersonating heiresses, of course." The shame burned in Sophia's chest, but she forced herself to meet Charlotte's gaze. "I clean offices. I was returning a lost wallet when everyone mistook me for you." Alexander stopped pacing abruptly. A lost wallet. His voice was dangerously quiet. "I found it in a wastebasket while cleaning the Johnson building," Sophia continued, her voice barely audible. "I just wanted to do the right thing, return it to the hotel. But when I walked into the lobby, everyone assumed I was Miss Blackwood. And You decided to play along," Charlotte finished coldly. "How delightfully opportunistic. Tell me, was seducing my fiancé part of your original plan? Or just a happy accident?" "It wasn't like that," Sophia's voice cracked. She turned to Alexander, desperate to make him understand. "I tried to tell you the truth so many times. In the hotel suite, at the diner, this morning before the ceremony. But you didn't," Alexander said, his gray eyes now cold as winter steel. "You let me fall in love with a lie." The words hit Sophia like physical blows. She could see the hurt beneath his anger, and it made everything worse. "My feelings for you were never a lie. What happened between us was real." "Was it?" Alexander's laugh was bitter. "How can I believe anything you say? You've been deceiving everyone for 3 days. You let me give you my grandmother's bracelet. Let me tell you I was falling in love with you. Let me make plans for a future with someone who doesn't even exist." Victoria Sterling, who had been silent until now, leaned forward with predatory interest. "The question is, Miss Martinez, what exactly were you hoping to gain from this deception? Money? Social position? A wealthy husband?" "I never wanted any of this." Sophia stood up so quickly her chair toppled backward. "Do you think I enjoyed lying to everyone? Do you think it was fun pretending to be someone I'm not, wearing clothes that cost more than my rent, eating at restaurants where I don't know which fork to use? I was terrified every single second. Then why didn't you just tell the truth? Alexander demanded. Sophia's composure finally cracked completely. Tears streamed down her face, taking her carefully applied makeup with them. Because I fell in love with you too. Because for the first time in my life, someone looked at me like I mattered, like I was worth something. Because in that diner, when you held my hand and told me about your dreams, I forgot that I was living a lie. I just felt happy. The room fell silent except for the sound of Sophia's quiet sobs. Alexander's expression flickered, the anger warring with something softer. Charlotte, however, remained unmoved. How touching. A regular Cinderella story, except Cinderella didn't steal someone else's identity and commit fraud in the process. I could have you arrested, you know. Identity theft, fraud, probably a dozen other charges. Charlotte, Alexander said quietly, that's enough. Is it? Charlotte's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose. This woman has made fools of all of us. She's probably sold her story to the tabloids already. Do you have any idea what this will do to both our families' reputations? Alexander moved to the window, staring out at the city below. When he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. What do you want, Charlotte? What I've always wanted. The merger between our families, the business partnership our fathers arranged, a proper marriage between equals. Charlotte's smile was razor-sharp. Surely you can see that Miss Martinez here was just a temporary distraction, an amusing diversion before you settled down to your real responsibilities. Sophia felt something die inside her chest. She looked at Alexander's rigid shoulders, at the way he wouldn't meet her eyes, and realized that Charlotte was winning. You're right, Sophia said quietly, standing up. This was all a mistake. I should go. She started toward the door, but Alexander's voice stopped her. Wait. Hope fluttered in her chest as she turned back. Alexander finally looked at her, and for a moment, she saw the man who had kissed her in the bridal suite, who had told her she was falling in love with her. But then his expression hardened again. I need to know one thing, he said. If none of this had happened, if you'd met me as Sophia Martinez, cleaning lady, would you have given me a second glance? Or was it only interesting when you thought I came with the wealthy heiress package? The question was like a knife between her ribs. How can you ask me that, after everything we shared? Answer the question. Sophia straightened her shoulders, gathering the last shreds of her dignity. I fell in love with the man who ate cheeseburgers in a diner and told me about his grandmother's bracelet. I fell in love with someone who protected me from his family's judgments and made me laugh when I was terrified. Your money never mattered to me, Alexander. I didn't even know how much you were worth until Charlotte mentioned billions. For a moment, something vulnerable flickered across Alexander's features. But then Charlotte stood up, moving to his side with fluid grace. Darling, she said, placing a manicured hand on his arm. Surely you can see this is all very convenient. She's saying exactly what she needs to say to maintain your interest. It's rather transparent, don't you think? Alexander looked between the two women, Charlotte polished and perfect and representing everything his family expected, and Sophia, tear-stained and heartbroken and completely genuine. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Finally, Sophia nodded. I understand. You have a life to get back to, responsibilities, expectations. I was just... She took a shaky breath. I was just a mistake you made for a few days. She turned and walked toward the door, each step feeling like she was leaving pieces of her heart behind. Sophia, Alexander called out when her hand was on the doorknob. She paused but didn't turn around. Yes? I'm sorry for all of this. You deserved better than to be caught up in our world's complications. Without looking back, Sophia whispered, So did you, and walked out of his life. 3 weeks after the wedding that never was, Sophia Martinez sat in the cramped break room of the Johnson building, mechanically eating a peanut butter sandwich, while her co-workers discussed the scandal that had dominated New York's tabloids. For days, she'd become infamous overnight. The cleaning lady who'd fooled Manhattan's elite and nearly married a billionaire. "Can you believe that girl had the nerve?" Sandra from the third floor was saying, pretending to be some rich heiress just to bag herself a millionaire husband. "Billionaire," corrected Marcus, not looking up from his crossword puzzle. "Alexander Sterling's worth about 12 billion, according to Forbes." Sophia's stomach clenched. She'd stopped reading the newspapers after the first week, when headlines like "Fake Iris Khan's Billionaire" and "The Greatest Gold Digger Scandal of the Century" had made her physically ill. The media had painted her as a calculating seductress, completely ignoring the accidental nature of the whole situation. "I heard they're getting married next month," Sandra continued. "Him and the real Blackwood girl. Probably for the best. People should stick to their own kind." Sophia stood abruptly, her sandwich forgotten. "I need some air." She climbed to the building's roof, a privilege of working late-night cleaning shifts. The city sparkled below her like scattered diamonds, beautiful and untouchable. Somewhere out there, Alexander was probably planning his real wedding to Charlotte, signing merger papers, living the life he was supposed to live before a clumsy cleaning lady had stumbled into his world. The rooftop door opened behind her, and Sophia turned, expecting to see Marcus coming to check on her. Instead, a familiar figure emerged from the shadows. "Hello, Sophia." Her heart stopped. Alexander stood there in a simple gray sweater and dark jeans, looking nothing like the polished billionaire from the society pages. His hair was longer than she remembered, slightly unkempt, and there were shadows under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. "What are you doing here?" she whispered. "Looking for you." He moved closer and she caught that familiar scent of expensive cologne mixed with something uniquely him. "You're a hard woman to find when you don't want to be found." "I'm not hiding, I'm working." Sophia wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warm evening air. "Shouldn't you be planning your wedding? I heard congratulations are in order." Alexander's expression darkened. "There's not going to be a wedding. Charlotte and I... It's over." Sophia's heart leaped, but she forced herself to remain calm. "I'm sorry to hear that." "Are you?" Alexander stepped closer, close enough that she could see the intensity burning in his gray eyes. "Because I'm not sorry at all. Turns out I have terrible taste in fiancés. I keep falling for women who aren't what they seem." "Alexander," Sophia started, but he held up a hand. "Let me finish. Do you know what I've been doing for the past 3 weeks? Besides going slowly insane and driving my family crazy by refusing to marry Charlotte?" Sophia shook her head, not trusting her voice. "I've been learning about you, the real you." Sophia Martinez, 26 years old, lives in a studio apartment in Queens, works 3 jobs to support her mother's medical bills, graduated valedictorian from high school but couldn't afford college, volunteers at the local animal shelter on weekends, returns lost wallets to hotels even when it means taking 2 buses and missing a day's pay. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. "How did you—" "I hired the best private investigator in the city. I needed to know if anything about you was real or if it was all just another performance." Alexander's voice grew softer. "Want to know what I found?" "I'm afraid to ask." "I found out that you've been working 60-hour weeks for 2 years to pay for your mother's cancer treatments. I found out that you've never taken a vacation, never bought yourself anything nice, never even owned a dress that cost more than $50 until I put you in that blue gown." His voice cracked slightly. "I found out that you once gave your last $20 to a homeless veteran because he reminded you of your father." Sophia was crying now, tears streaming down her face. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I've been an idiot." Alexander reached out, gently wiping away her tears with his thumbs. "Because I let my pride and my fear make me push away the most genuine person I've ever met. Because I've spent 3 weeks in meetings with Charlotte, listening to her talk about market strategies and social positioning, and all I could think about was a woman who ate cheeseburgers with me in a diner and made me remember what it felt like to be human. But I lied to you," Sophia whispered. "I let you believe I was someone else. You were caught in an impossible situation and you tried to tell me the truth multiple times. I was too stubborn to listen. Alexander cupped her face in his hands. Do you know what convinced me that your feelings were real? What? That last day in the conference room when Charlotte was threatening to have you arrested. You could have blamed everything on me. Could have said I seduced you or pressured you to keep up the charade. Instead, you protected me, even when it meant destroying yourself in the process. Sophia's breath caught. I couldn't let you get hurt because of my mistakes. That's when I knew. Alexander's voice was barely above a whisper. That's when I realized that Sophia Martinez, cleaning lady from Queens, was worth more than all the heiresses and socialites in Manhattan combined. Alexander, I love you, he interrupted. Not Charlotte Blackwood, not some fictional heiress, not even the woman in the designer gowns. I love Sophia Martinez, who works 3 jobs and volunteers at animal shelters and makes me laugh until my sides hurt. I love the woman who was brave enough to return a stranger's wallet and kind enough to worry about my feelings even when her own world was falling apart. But your family, the expectations, the merger, my family will have to learn to accept my choices. As for the merger, there are other ways to expand Sterling Industries that don't require me to marry someone I don't love. Alexander smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him since that night in the diner. Besides, I've been thinking about starting a foundation, something focused on helping working families afford healthcare. I know someone who might have some insights into what kind of help people really need. Sophia felt her carefully constructed, walls crumbling completely. I don't know how to be part of your world. Then teach me how to be part of yours. Alexander pulled her closer, his forehead resting against hers. We'll figure it out together. No more lies, no more pretending to be someone we're not. Just us figuring out how to make this work. The media will have a field day, Sophia said, even as her heart soared. Let them. I'm done caring what other people think. Alexander's hands moved to her waist, holding her gently but firmly. The only opinion that matters to me is yours. So tell me, Sophia Martinez, do you think a billionaire and a cleaning lady can make it work? Sophia looked into his eyes and saw everything she'd ever wanted. Love, acceptance, a future built on honesty instead of expectations. I think, she said, standing on her tiptoes to close the distance between them, that stranger things have happened. When Alexander kissed her, it was nothing like their desperate kiss in the bridal suite. This was a promise, a new beginning, a love story that would be written in their own words instead of society's expectations. 6 months later, Sophia Martinez Sterling stood in the same diner where she'd first let herself believe in fairy tales, watching her husband flip pancakes behind the counter. They'd bought Mel's place after the original owner decided to retire, and Alexander had discovered a surprising talent for breakfast cooking. Order up, he called, sliding a plate of perfectly golden pancakes across the counter to their regular customer, Mrs. Chen from the laundromat next door. Sophia smiled as she refilled coffee cups, her simple gold wedding band catching the morning light. They'd married in a small ceremony at City Hall, with only their closest friends and Sophia's mother in attendance. No society photographers, no designer gowns, no prenuptial agreements, just 2 people promising to love each other exactly as they were. The Sterling Foundation had opened its doors 3 months ago, providing healthcare assistance to working families across the city. Alexander split his time between running the foundation and working at the diner, claiming that serving pancakes was more satisfying than most board meetings he'd attended. Hey, beautiful, Alexander called out, catching her eye across the busy restaurant. Have I told you today that I love you? Only about 12 times, Sophia replied, her heart still fluttering every time he said those words. But I don't mind hearing it again. As the morning rush continued around them, Sophia reflected on how a simple act of kindness, returning a lost wallet, had changed both their lives forever. Sometimes the most beautiful love stories began with the most unlikely circumstances, and sometimes the greatest treasures were found in the most unexpected places. After all, even fairy tales needed a bit of real life to make them truly magical.